Ubisoft has had a rough year. For the past 12 months, if you keep up with gaming news, it's hard not to hear about them. From the awful and mind-boggling $700 million flop that was Skull and Bones, to the troubling and buggy launch of Star Wars Outlaws, and then the subsequent delay and controversies of Assassin's Creed Shadows, the publisher has been struggling to make and keep players happy for a while. It feels like every month they're up to some new scheme to further ruin their reputation with players. Like their recent NFT game that you probably didn't even know came out, let alone existed. My focus isn't on all those things, however, as I want to focus on a game that had the potential to be a lot more, and like always, Ubisoft fumbled the bag with. The game I'm referring to, of course, is XDefiant. Released on May 21st, 2024, XDefiant is, or was, a free-to-play first-person shooter that came out on nearly all current-gen platforms and was developed by Ubisoft San Francisco. In short, XDefiant was Ubisoft Call of Duty with factions and abilities, with the main selling point being the fact that it had no skill-based matchmaking, a system where players are matched with others of their skill level and basically forced to always sweat to do well. Many games nowadays use this system, like Call of Duty and Fortnite, and it's a very controversial talking point. In my opinion, it sucks. It has its place in certain games like Counter-Strike and other highly competitive games, but I think games like COD should have a separate ranked mode with skill-based matchmaking and keep a casual playlist without it. There's also discussions and talks that these games intentionally manipulate players to keep playing by giving them bad lobbies, and then giving them subsequent good ones to keep that dopamine coming in, which, if true, is very shady. There's also a patent by COD developer Activision that you can find on Google right now explaining that they intentionally match players with one another to incentivize in-game purchases and microtransactions. To quote, "The system may match a more expert or marquee player with a junior player to encourage the junior player to make game-related purchases of items possessed or used by the marquee player." That doesn't sound predatory at all. I love when games manipulate me into spending money through hidden systems that aren't explained to consumers. Besides that, I also just don't want to have to sweat my ass off every time I hop into a match of COD. For me, it's just not fun, and because of it, I've stopped buying CODs completely. That's where XDefiant came in. A free FPS with no skill-based matchmaking and casual matches that also plays like Call of Duty? Sign me up. And so after its announcement back in July 2021, and then after the multiple delays, I finally got the chance to play. In my opinion, XDefiant was a pretty fun FPS. It felt smooth and had solid gunplay, the abilities were fun to mess around with, and the maps were all pretty good. I played it a bunch at release, both alone and with friends, and overall it was a great time. It was nice to not have to try hard every single match I played. Other players were enjoying it as well, as when it came out, the servers were packed, and according to CNET, XDefiant had over 1 million players on the game within the first 2.5 hours of its launch in May, averaging 300,000 concurrent players in that first 48 hours. The first few weeks of launch were definitely the most active, but as time went on, things would change for the worse. Nowadays, live service games need to constantly push out new content to keep players playing. Within the current landscape, there are simply too many games for players' attention spans to stick to just one, so developers have to try and compensate by constantly putting new things into their games. XDefiant was trying its best to keep up. They had battle passes, new seasons, an item shop, new maps, new weapons, everything you're supposed to do in the textbook of keeping a game alive in 2024, but they just weren't able to keep up. Even as a fan of the game, I can admit its flaws. I have a lot of respect for what the studio, and especially the man behind XDefiant, Mark Rubin, were trying to do. Rubin is an ex-COD developer and was the executive producer for the game. He would make announcements of how the game was progressing before its launch, and keep players up to date with news. He was a very strong believer in communication between players and developers. It was something he cited in the announcement of the game's end. But as we know, none of this was enough to sustain the game's life. Player counts dwindled, and my friends started to quit the game as well. And even as an actual fan of the game, I slowly started to play less and less. But what happened? XDefiant was clearly not the COD killer that some people were claiming it was. Honestly, I never believed that sentiment, and rarely even saw people claiming that it was, but regardless, it wasn't. I don't think it was ever really meant to be, but at the same time, it's hard to compete with COD when you're a clone, and COD still very much exists. The fact is, most players just don't care about skill-based matchmaking, and so there wasn't much incentive for players to put time into this game when Modern Warfare 3 was still pushing and BO6 came out in October. The content drops were good, but not enough to keep players coming back. There were rumors months ago that the game was facing the threat of shutting down if they couldn't boost their player counts. I honestly thought it wasn't true, and Mark Rubin came out saying it wasn't either, but as we see now, it clearly was. I think the main problem that stopped me from playing, and this is subjective, was the fact that XDefiant just had no sauce. The cosmetics and skins were just not appealing. So many games have really interesting and cool skins and collaborations, but XDefiant's were for the most part just ass. I spent very little money on the game, even though I believed in it and wanted to see it succeed. But even I had a hard time justifying buying skins when they're so boring and uninspired. So why would anyone buy these skins when most likely you're already playing COD, and they just released a collaboration with your favorite franchise, or dropped a new dumbass monkey skin? Most players are gonna spend money on COD instead. Also, why the fuck would they limit this game to the Ubisoft launcher on PC? It's a really baffling choice. If you want to reach the most players possible on PC, put your game on Steam. Ubisoft Connect is a horrible launcher and application that signs you out damn near every time you try to reopen it, even when clicking keep me signed in. I hate this launcher so fucking much and hope dearly that developers stop putting their PC games on anything besides Steam, because 99% of them are garbage. GOG is good, and I love the game preservation things that they're trying to achieve, but good launchers and storefronts are few and far between on PC. A mix of all of these problems and the fierce competition that comes with releasing a game in this genre is what caused XDefiant to die in the end. The game just didn't offer enough to keep players interested in wanting to spend money on the game, and so they slowly started to leave and move on to other things. It's hard enough to make games like this sustainable, but the game was free to play and needed players to spend money on battle passes and skins to fund it. And when your skins look like this, it's gonna be hard to find people that actually want to buy them. It's unfortunate. I really would have liked to see a studio release an FPS that's actually fun and doesn't have skill-based matchmaking in their casual playlists. But of course, it had to be Ubisoft who released this one, and as we continue to see, release after release, their games are disappointments. I played a little bit of XDefiant after the announcement for this video, and during the nightmare that is the Ubisoft launcher, and it surprisingly didn't take too long to find a match. The game still feels pretty similar to how it did before, with only slight updates and minor visual changes since I last played. Honestly, the game is just fine. Definitely best experience with friends though, as playing alone can feel very isolating and boring, especially since game chat and voice chat are completely dead. I really liked the idea of this game succeeding and taking players away from the ever-growing and money-hungry giant that is modern-day COD, but in the end, XDefiant failed. Players who have already installed the game can keep playing until June 3rd, 2025, but after that, the game will be wiped away forever. It's really sad to see, and an unfortunate end for a game that was trying to be more. I feel sorry for all the developers who worked hard making this game and supporting it after launch. Nowadays, games don't just die, as when they do, the studios behind them are usually killed off too. It's very likely that many people will be out of work after XDefiant's death, and that really sucks. But that's not players' faults. It's Ubisoft higher-ups who are to blame. I sincerely hope everyone who worked on this game is able to recover from this and successfully move on. But just like the release and extremely fast death of the game Concord, it's a cautionary tale. We very likely will not see another game release like this anytime soon, because as XDefiant proved, it's extremely difficult to compete with COD and their seemingly endless budgets. So, goodbye XDefiant. May your anti-skill-based matchmaking sentiment live on. That's all I have to say about XDefiant. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to do whatever you want. I don't control you, but I do hope you have a great rest of your day. See you soon.